Hi everyone. I wanted to give you an idea of what a data set would look like in a correlational study. In a correlational study, you're usually collecting data with questionnaires. You aren't assigning people to conditions or situations like you would in an experiment. So I might be giving out a questionnaire to my participants that asks each person, how many classes are you taking this quarter? How many units are you taking this quarter? How much time are you spending in class each week this quarter? And how many hours of sleep are you getting per week this quarter? And I don't know ahead of time what answers my participants are going to give me, but I might get some people who say that they're taking one class this quarter. I might get some people who say that they're taking two classes, and I might get some people who say that they're taking three classes. Their answers wouldn't necessarily be recorded in order like this. Um, usually usually it would just follow the order of the data collection. So the first participant who provided me with data would be participant one. The second participant would be participant two, and their answers would probably be out of order. I also probably wouldn't get the same number of answers from each person, but I did that just to make this data set a little bit more simple. Um, so I'm also recording the number of units that each person is taking. So person one said that they're taking one class. Maybe this person is taking the 4-unit class, so they would say 4 units. Person two is also taking a 1-unit class, but maybe they're taking a 5-unit class, so they're actually taking 5 units. And maybe this person is taking a 3-unit class. So even though they're all taking one class, they're not taking exactly the same number of units. But overall, the people who are taking 2 classes will be taking more units than these 3 people are. So these 3 people are going to have answers that fall into a higher range than these 3 people did. So maybe this person is taking 2 4-unit classes. Maybe this person is taking 2 3-unit classes, which would be 6 units, and this person is taking 2 5-unit classes, so they would actually have 10. And then maybe we have 2 people. Well, maybe this person right here is taking 2 4-unit classes. I'm sorry, 3 4-unit classes, because they're taking 3 classes. So that would be 4, 4, 4. This person would be taking 12 units. Maybe this person is also taking 3 4-unit classes, which would be 12. And maybe this person is taking 3 5-unit classes, which would be 15 units. I'm also asking each person how many hours are you spending in class per week. Well, if this person is taking 1 4-unit class, then that should mean that they're spending 4 hours in class per week. Or maybe if class gets out a little bit early, maybe it's only 3.5. Then maybe this person is taking a 5-unit class, maybe 4.5, maybe 2.5. Maybe if class gets out half an hour early. But maybe, what if we have a person who doesn't attend every class? I'm sorry. What if we have a person who doesn't always arrive on time? What if they arrive 1 hour late to each class? Even though this person is taking 6 units, they might only be in class 5 hours a week if they don't always come on time. So if we're talking about the actual time spent in class and not the time that they're supposed to be spending in class, some people might have some different answers. Like, what if this person is even more late to each class? this person might only be in class 7 hours a week, even though they should be in class 9 or 10 hours a week. Say that these are our answers. Now, hours of sleep is related to a lot of different things, like um, how many hours of sleep each person needs per night. Different people might need different amounts of sleep. It might also depend on how much, whether they're working late at night, um, whether they have children, or whether but it might also be related to how many classes they're taking, because if they have a lot of homework, they might have to stay up late. So let's just say that maybe this person has less homework, so they're sleeping 7 hours. But let's say that this person is also taking only one class, but maybe this person has a little bit more responsibilities to take care of than this person does, so they get a little bit less sleep. They're only getting 5 hours. Maybe this person has even more responsibilities, so they're only getting 4 hours. So these people who are all taking one class can get different amounts of sleep because of other reasons. But it might be that these people who are taking two classes might overall be getting less sleep than these people are. So maybe we have a 5, a 4, and a 5. And these three people should be getting even less sleep overall, maybe. So it could be that these people are 4, 4, and 3, maybe. Now if this ends up being our data set, what we're seeing here is that overall, as the number of classes goes up, the number of units goes up along with it, because the people who are taking more classes are obviously taking more units. So as this goes up along with it. So these two variables are positively correlated. There's a positive correlation between number of classes and number of units. What about these two? Number of classes and time spent in class per week. Well, we can see that if we look at these two columns right here, we can see that the people who are spending more time in class per week are also, sorry, the people who are taking more classes are spending more time in class per week, typically. So as this goes up along with it, which would mean that these two variables are positively correlated, number of classes and time spent in class. But number of classes and hours of sleep have a negative correlation in this data set, because as the number of classes is going up, the hours of sleep is going down. So we can see that the people who are taking only one class are getting the most sleep. The people who are taking two classes are getting less sleep. And the people who are taking three classes are getting even less sleep. So as this is going up, this is going down. They're going in opposite directions, which would mean that these two are negatively correlated. The people who are taking the lowest number of classes are getting the most sleep, and the people who are taking the highest number of classes are getting the least amount of sleep. Number of units and hours of sleep are also negatively correlated, because as this is going up, this is going down. So also, time in class per week and hours of sleep are negatively correlated, because as time spent in class goes up, as this goes up, this goes down, because when we go down to higher numbers down here, we're looking at people who are taking more classes and have more homework. So these people down here who have more homework will probably be getting less sleep. So each possible pair of variables has its own correlation. Um, some of them were positive, some were negative. We saw that all correlations in which we paired something with hours of all correlations involving sleep were negative because um, A and D were negative, B and D was negative, and C and D was also negative. Now we can also make scatter plots to look at the correlations. Let's look at the correlation between units and classes. We just highlight these. We go to Insert. We go to Scatter right here. We can see that here we have, so number of classes is down here, and number of units is on the y-axis. So here we have the 3 people who are taking 1 class. They're all above 1. This person is the person who has 3 units. 3 is right there. This person is taking a 4-unit class. This is the person with a 5-unit class. So it's 3, 4, and 5 units. Here we have the people who are taking 2 classes. One person has 6 units. One person has 8 units. One person has 10 units over here. Finally, we have the 3 people who are taking 3 classes. But see how these 2 people both have 12 units? They're actually stacked above each other right here. This dot is actually 2 people. It's actually persons. It's actually both of these 2 people who are right here. This dot. This dot is the person. This dot is the last person who's taking 3 classes and has 15 units because 3 classes is here, 15 units is over here on the left. So usually each dot is one person. Each dot stands for one person's 2 answers, but this dot happens to be 2 people. We could also make a scatter plot for classes and sleep. This one is negative because here's the people who are taking 1 class right here. This is their sleep. One person out of these 3 people who are taking 1 class, one is 4 hours of sleep, one's 5 hours of sleep, one's 7 hours of sleep. Here we have the people who are taking 2 classes who are getting 5 hours of sleep here, and this person is getting 4 hours of sleep. Here's the people who are taking 3 classes, and they're getting either 4 hours of sleep or 3 hours of sleep right there. So the people who are taking 1 class are getting more sleep up here. The people who are taking 2 classes are less sleep down here. The people who are taking 3 classes are down at the lowest sleep. So that's why, as the number of classes is going up here, the amount of sleep is going down from left to right. So if the dots go down from left to right like this, it's a negative correlation. The first one we saw was positive because the dots were rising from left to right. We could also do a correlation between units and sleep. We can look at the scatter plot here. We have here we have units. Here we have sleep hours. This one is also negative, but has a little bit more of a curve to it. So we could do we could create a scatter plot for every possible pair of variables. We could also create a correlation coefficient for each pair of variables. So let's think about number of classes and number of units, number of classes and time spent in class, number of classes and hours of sleep. Those are all of the correlations involving number of classes. We can look at the correlation between number of units and time spent in class, and number of units and hours of sleep. We're not including number of units and number of classes because that was already included up here. We can also do time spent in class and hours of sleep. So that should be all possible pairs of variables. So if we want, we can get a correlation coefficient for each of these pairs. So what we have to do is type in equals CORREL parentheses and highlight the two columns of data. So if we want the correlation between number of classes and number of units, we would highlight number of classes, put a comma, highlight number of units, and then close the parentheses and press enter, and we get this correlation of 0.93, which is a positive number, so these two are positively correlated. Remember that the correlation coefficient goes from -1 to +1. -1 is a perfect negative correlation, +1 is a perfect positive. So this is pretty close to a perfect positive, which means it's a really strong really strong positive correlation, which makes sense because you would expect for when the number of classes goes up, the number of units always goes up along with it. It's a really consistent relationship. So if we look at this correlation right here, it's pretty consistent right here. There aren't a lot of dots out here or a lot of dots out here that aren't following the pattern. It's a pretty consistent pattern right here. What about units and time spent in class? Well, we saw here that usually students who are taking more classes are spending more time in class per week, but it seems like it's a little bit less consistent because we have some students in here who aren't always attending all of their classes, or they're coming to class late sometimes. So this correlation between classes and time in class might be a little bit weaker. So we can type in equals CORREL, highlight this, comma, highlight this, and then close it, and then press enter. And if the correlation is weaker, if it's a weaker positive correlation, it'll come out closer to 0. It might come out to something like 0.5 or 0.6 instead of 0.9. So I was actually wrong. It's pretty much exactly the same as the first correlation. Now, let's look at number of classes and hours of sleep. These two have a negative correlation in this data set, so it should come out to a negative number. So I highlighted my two columns. It's a negative 0.63. So it's a negative number, which means it's a negative correlation in this data set. But it's also not as big of a number as these ones are. It's closer to 0, which means it's actually a weaker correlation than these two are. The strength of the correlation has to do with how far the value comes out from 0. So if it had come out to negative 0.94, it would have been the same strength as this one. It just would have been a negative correlation. equals CORR. What about units and time spent in class? It's a 0.98, so it's a positive correlation, and it's even stronger than the other two positive correlations are. So there's a really strong correlation or relationship between classes and time spent in class. As this goes up, this consistently goes up with it. Units and sleep, this should also be negative because in our data we're noticing how students who are taking more units are getting less sleep down here. Let's see what it comes out to. So it doesn't like what I'm doing for some reason. Try again. So it's units and sleep. It's a negative 0.57. So this was a negative correlation. This one is actually a weaker negative correlation than this one is because 0.57 is a smaller number than 0.63. It's closer to 0. Time spent in class and hours of sleep should be negative. We saw how students who are taking more classes and are spending more time in class are getting less sleep, probably because they're doing more homework. So let's take a look at this. Highlight this column, comma, highlight this column, close it. So it's a negative 0.6, which means it's halfway, it's between this one and this one. It's almost halfway between 0.57 and 0.63. So this one was the weakest negative. This one was the strongest negative. This one was in between. What about the positives? This was the weakest positive. This was stronger. This was the strongest positive. As you go closer to -1, it's a stronger negative. When you go closer to +1, it's a stronger positive.